The wind cut like broken glass across the Thornton Ranch that January morning in 1883. Eliza stood in the snow outside the barn, watching three men nail a foreclosure notice to her father's grave marker. She didn't cry. Couldn't afford to. 24 years old, $57 in debt for every year she'd been alive, and absolutely nobody who believed she could save this place. Miss Thornton. The banker, Wallace Crane, approached with his hat in his hands like he was attending a funeral. Maybe he was. "I'm real sorry about your father. He was a good man." "Was he?" Eliza's voice came out flat. Good men don't die owing half the territory. Crane flinched. Behind him, his two hired men, more muscle than business sense, pretended to study the frozen ground. One of them, a kid barely 18 with a deputy's badge pinned crooked on his coat, kept glancing at the ranch house like he expected someone to come charging out with a rifle. "The bank's been patient," Crane continued. "More than patient, considering what?" Eliza turned to face him fully. Her father's coat hung too large on her frame, sleeves rolled up to keep her hands free. Underneath, she wore men's work pants tucked into boots that had belonged to her brother before he turned 13. "Considering I'm a woman? Considering everyone in town's been placing bets on how fast I'll fail?" The banker's face reddened. "Now that ain't fair." 60 days, she interrupted. "Give me 60 days to make the payment." "Miss Thornton, that's 30 then." Crane sighed, and in that sound, Eliza heard everything she needed to know about what this valley thought of her. Pity, contempt, the quiet certainty that she was already finished. 2 weeks, he said finally. "That's the absolute deal." She said it so fast, Crane actually blinked. Behind her, through the barn's open door, her younger brother Samuel was supposed to be mucking stalls. Instead, he was pressed against the wall, 16 years old and skinny as a fence post, listening to every word that decided whether they'd have a home come February. Crane cleared his throat. "Miss Thornton, I have to ask, do you actually have a plan, or are you just stalling?" She smiled, but there wasn't any warmth in it. "Maybe both." The banker studied her for a long moment, then replaced his hat and turned to leave. His men followed, boots crunching through ice-crusted snow. As they mounted their horses, the young deputy glanced back one more time. "My father worked this ranch," Eliza called out suddenly. The men paused. 32 years he fought this land, this weather, this whole damn territory that wanted him gone. And you know what killed him? Nobody answered. "Pneumonia." She spat the word like a curse. Caught it driving cattle through a blizzard because Silas Granger's men blocked the South Pass. Made him take the long route through the mountains. 3 extra days in a storm that should have killed everyone. Only killed him. Crane's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth. Granger's the most successful rancher in Montana Territory. He doesn't need to. He wants this land." Eliza's voice went quiet, which somehow made it worse. "Always has. And now he's waiting for me to fail so he can buy it for nothing." "That's paranoid talk, miss. Get off my property." The banker opened his mouth, thought better of it, and kicked his horse into motion. Within minutes, they were 3 dark shapes disappearing into the white landscape, leaving Eliza alone with a grave, a foreclosure notice, and absolutely no idea how to survive the next 2 weeks. Samuel emerged from the barn, shoulders hunched against wind that seemed determined to peel the skin right off their bones. "We're finished, aren't we?" he asked. Eliza stared at the horizon, where the mountains rose like broken teeth against a gray sky. Somewhere beyond those peaks was Canada, and beyond that maybe a life where she wasn't fighting just to breathe. But running meant abandoning the only thing their father had ever built. It meant proving right every man who'd said women couldn't hold frontier land. It meant losing. "No," she said finally. "We're not finished. Not yet." The town of Black Ridge sat in a valley like something forgotten by progress. 2 days after the banker's visit, Eliza rode in with a list of supplies they couldn't afford and a desperation she tried hard to hide. The general store smelled like leather and tobacco smoke. Old Man Hewitt stood behind the counter, scratching numbers into a ledger with fingers bent from arthritis. "Miss Thornton." He didn't look up. "Heard about your trouble." "Everyone's heard about my trouble." Eliza set her list on the counter. "I need 2 weeks' credit." "Can't do it." "Mr. Hewitt." "I said I can't." Finally, he met her eyes, and what she saw there wasn't cruelty, just fear. Granger came through yesterday, made it clear any merchant extending credit to the Thorntons would lose his contract for supplying his ranch. I got a family too, Miss Thornton. The words hit like a punch to the stomach. So he's already making moves. I'm sorry. Eliza picked up her list, hands steady through sheer force of will. No, you're not, but I understand. She was halfway to the door when Hewitt called out, Miss Thornton? When she turned, he slid a small package across the counter. Rifle cartridges. Already paid for by your father last month. Forgot to pick them up. They both knew that was a lie. Her father had picked up ammunition the day before he died, but Eliza took the package anyway, nodded once, and walked out into cold that felt personal. The street was half empty, which was normal for January. What wasn't normal was how people looked at her. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men studied their boots. The blacksmith, who'd known her since she was 6 years old, actually crossed to the other side of the street rather than acknowledge her. This was what failure looked like in a place like Black Ridge. You became invisible before you became history. Eliza was untying her horse when the commotion started. Shouting erupted from the far end of town, near the saloon. She turned to see a crowd forming, that particular kind of mob energy that meant someone was about to get hurt. Through the mass of bodies, she caught glimpses of a man on horseback, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat so weathered it looked like it had survived a war. Get out of our town, someone yelled. We don't want your kind here. The rider didn't respond, just sat his horse with the kind of stillness that suggested he'd been in worse situations and survived them all. Behind him, 4 more riders waited, all of them looking half-starved and completely exhausted. Sheriff Coleman pushed through the crowd, hand resting on his pistol. He was a good man in most ways, fair, honest, not particularly bright. You need to keep moving, he told the lead rider. Nothing for you here. We're looking for work. The rider's voice was rough, like it didn't get used much. Heard some of the ranches might need hands for spring. Do you know who this is? A local rancher named Davies stepped forward, finger-jabbing at the stranger. This is Cade Mercer. The Cade Mercer. A ripple went through the crowd. Even Eliza, who'd been too busy fighting for survival to follow frontier gossip, recognized the name. Cade Mercer, trail boss who'd led cattle drives through Sioux territory when everyone said it was suicide. Survivor of the Red Creek Massacre. A man with a reputation built on violence and impossible odds. And apparently, someone Black Ridge wanted nothing to do with. I heard you killed 6 men in Wyoming, Davies continued, over a card game. It was 4 men, Cade said quietly, and it wasn't over cards. That's supposed to make us feel better? Wasn't trying to make you feel anything, just stating facts. The crowd pressed closer, hostile energy building like a storm. Eliza recognized this dynamic, the way scared people turned mean, the way fear became violence if you gave it enough room to breathe. Sheriff Coleman's hand tightened on his gun. Mr. Mercer, I'm asking you politely to move on. Don't want trouble. Neither do I. Then ride out. Now. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Cade's eyes swept across the crowd, and for just a second his gaze locked with Eliza's. She saw something there she recognized, the particular exhaustion of someone who'd fought too long and was running out of reasons to keep fighting. Then he turned his horse and rode out of town, his 4 men following in silence. The crowd dispersed, congratulating themselves on running off a dangerous man. Eliza stood beside her horse, watching those 5 riders disappear into the white landscape, and thinking about what it meant that Black Ridge feared strangers more than it feared Silas Granger's slow stranglehold on the valley. She was still thinking about it 3 hours later when the blizzard hit. The storm came fast, the way they did in Montana. 1 minute you could see the trail, next minute you were blind in a wall of white that turned the whole world into an enemy. Eliza had been riding fence line on the northern edge of the property, checking for damage Granger's men might have done in the night. Samuel was with her, though she'd told him to stay home. The kid never listened, which was both annoying and the only reason she hadn't completely lost her mind yet. We need to turn back, Samuel shouted over wind that screamed like something alive. Can't see the trail. So what do we do? That was the question, wasn't it? In weather like this, you either found shelter or you died. Simple as that. Eliza squinted through the storm, trying to remember what was out here. There'd been an old line shack somewhere to the east, hadn't there? Built by her father years ago, barely more than 4 walls and a roof. But it would be enough. If they could find it. Follow me! She kicked her horse forward, trusting instinct more than sight. The wind tried to peel them right out of their saddles. Snow wasn't just falling anymore. It was attacking, horizontal sheets that made breathing feel like drowning. Eliza's face went numb, her hands locked around the reins, fingers so cold she wasn't sure they'd ever straighten again. Behind her, Samuel's horse stumbled. She heard him hit the ground before she saw it, heard his shout cut short by impact. Eliza wheeled her horse around, nearly went blind from snow and panic, found him lying in a drift with his leg bent at an angle that made her stomach clench. "It's not broken," he gasped as she dropped beside him. "Just twisted. I can walk." "Like hell you can." She tried to pull him up, but he cried out in pain. Too injured to ride, too heavy for her to carry far, and the storm was getting worse every second. This was how people died out here. Not dramatically, not fighting, just quietly, buried in white, becoming part of the landscape. Eliza. Samuel's voice was small, scared, in a way he tried hard to hide. "I'm sorry." "Shut up. We're not dying today." But she had no idea how to make that true. That's when she heard the horse. At first she thought she'd imagined it, just wind playing tricks. Then she saw the shape materializing through the storm, a rider leading 2 extra horses, moving through the blizzard like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Cade Mercer pulled up beside them, his face a mask of ice. "You two got a death wish?" he asked. "What are you doing out here?" Eliza had to scream just to be heard, saw the storm coming, figured anyone fool enough to be out on the range in this weather might need help. He dismounted, moved to Samuel without waiting for permission. "Kid's leg?" "Twisted ankle. Maybe worse." Cade ran his hands over Samuel's boot with surprising gentleness, checking for breaks. "Not shattered. That's something." He looked up at Eliza. "There a shelter nearby?" "Line shack. Maybe half a mile east." "Maybe. I can't see anything in this." "Then we better move fast." He lifted Samuel like the kid weighed nothing, settled him on one of the spare horses, and tied him in place with rope that appeared from somewhere in his coat. The whole time, he worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done emergency rescues in worse conditions. "You lead," he told Eliza. "I'll make sure we don't lose anyone." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle this herself, didn't need some stranger's help, wasn't weak just because the valley thought she was. But pride was a luxury you couldn't afford when death was breathing down your neck. So she nodded and turned her horse east, praying she remembered the landscape better than she feared she did. The ride felt like hours. Might have been 20 minutes. Time did strange things when you were fighting just to stay conscious. Eliza's entire world narrowed to the next 100 feet, the next 50, the next 10. Snow piled so high their horses were struggling through drifts up to their chests. Then, like a miracle she didn't believe in, the shack appeared. It was barely standing, one wall listing badly, roof sagging under snow, but it had 4 walls and a door that still closed. Cade got Samuel inside while Eliza tied the horses to a collapsed section of fence that might hold if the wind didn't get worse. Inside, the shack was dark and smelled like old wood and animal droppings, but it was shelter. Cade got a fire going in the stone hearth with kindling he'd been carrying because apparently this man traveled prepared for the apocalypse. Samuel huddled near the flames, teeth chattering. Eliza sank against the wall, letting herself feel the cold now that they were safe. Her hands were shaking, from temperature or fear or delayed shock she couldn't tell. "You're lucky I'm an idiot," Cade said, feeding more wood to the fire. "Excuse me?" Smart man would have kept riding when the storm hit, found his own shelter, not gone looking for strangers who probably hate him. "I don't hate you." He glanced at her, firelight catching something in his eyes that might have been amusement. "You don't know me well enough to hate me yet." "Why did you come looking for us?" The question hung in the small space. Cade took his time answering, like he was trying to figure that out himself. "Saw you in town," he said finally. "Way people looked at you, same way they looked at me, like you were already gone, just didn't know it yet." He shrugged. "Seemed wrong to leave you out here." Samuel coughed, drawing their attention. The kid's color was better now, warming up near the fire. He'd be fine. They'd all be fine, assuming the shack didn't collapse and bury them. "Thank you." Eliza said quietly, "for saving us." "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this." He was right. Outside, the storm was hitting with everything it had, wind screaming around the shack's walls like something trying to get in. They were trapped here until it passed. Could be hours, could be days. And sitting in a one-room shelter with a man whose reputation was built on violence probably wasn't the smartest decision she'd ever made. But smart decisions were for people with options. Eliza had run out of those about the same time her father stopped breathing. Whoopee. But the storm lasted 36 hours. For the first 12, they barely spoke. Cade maintained the fire with wood he'd somehow packed on those extra horses. Eliza rationed out the dried meat and hardtack from her saddlebags. Samuel slept, or pretended to, giving the adults space to exist in uncomfortable silence. Around hour 15, Cade said, "Why'd you stay?" Eliza looked up from the knife she was sharpening, more to have something to do with her hands than because it needed it. "What?" "Your ranch. From what I heard in town, you're drowning in debt. Could sell out, head somewhere easier." "There is nowhere easier. San Francisco's easier, Denver. Even Billings is easier than trying to hold a ranch you can't afford." She studied him across the firelight. His face was hard to read, carved from stone and shadow, scarred along the left jaw from something that must have been bad when it happened. This close, he didn't look particularly dangerous, just tired. "My father built that ranch from nothing," she said. "Fought off claim jumpers, survived 3 winters that killed half the valley, lost my mother to cholera, and kept going anyway. You know what he told me before he died?" "What?" "Don't let them take it." Those were his last words. Not "I love you," not "be happy," just "don't let them take it." She set down the knife. "So, no, I'm not selling. Not to Granger, not to the bank, not to anyone. Even if staying kills you?" "Even then." Cade was quiet for a while, staring into flames that painted shadows across his weathered face. "That's either the bravest thing I've heard or the stupidest." "Maybe both." He smiled at that. Just a small thing, barely there, but it changed his entire face, made him look younger, less like a man who'd survived too much violence. "What about you?" Eliza asked. "Why come to Black Ridge if you knew the whole town would hate you?" "Didn't have anywhere else to go." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." "Fair enough. Everyone had secrets out here. You didn't push unless you wanted people pushing back." But later, when Samuel was definitely asleep and the storm outside had settled into a steady howl, Cade spoke again. "We were running cattle near the Canadian border," he said quietly. 2,300 head, biggest drive I'd ever bossed. Everything was going smooth until we crossed into Blackfoot territory. He paused, jaw working like the words were fighting him. "Local ranchers up there paid off some of the tribe to let us through. Only they didn't pay enough, or they paid the wrong people. Or maybe the whole thing was a setup from the start. Don't know, don't matter. Point is, we got ambushed in a canyon pass." Eliza waited, didn't interrupt. "Lost 19 men," Cade continued. "Most of the herd scattered. The ranchers who hired me blamed me for the route, said I should have known better, refused to pay anyone who survived. So now I got 4 men who followed me through hell and got nothing to show for it except nightmares and empty pockets." "That's why you're looking for work." "That's why we're running out of options." The fire crackled, wind screamed, and in that small shack in the middle of a Montana blizzard, 2 people who'd been beaten down by the frontier sat in the understanding that sometimes survival was all you could hope for. "I need ranch hands," Eliza said suddenly. Cade's eyes snapped to hers. "What?" "You heard me. I can't pay much, can't pay anything until I solve this debt situation. But I can offer food, shelter, and a percentage of whatever profits we make come spring." "Miss Thornton, ikiu bat kitele u masin." "Eliza, and I'm serious. I got more land than I can work, cattle that need driving to market, and about 2 weeks before I lose everything. You need work. I need help. Seems simple." "The town will lose their minds." "The town already thinks I'm crazy." She leaned forward. "Look, I know your reputation. I know people think you're dangerous. Maybe they're right. But you risked your life to save 2 strangers in a blizzard, and that tells me more about who you are than any story they tell in saloons." Cade stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "You're actually serious?" Dead serious. What do you say? Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, a decision was being made that would change everything, not just for Eliza and Cade, but for the entire valley. Neither of them knew it yet. Neither of them could have predicted how far the consequences would reach. But sometimes the most dangerous decisions are the ones you make when you're out of options. All right, Cade said finally. We'll work for you. 3 months. After that, we'll see if you still think hiring me was a good idea. Eliza extended her hand. Deal. His handshake was firm, calloused, and warmer than she expected. When he let go, she felt like she'd just made a pact with someone either extremely capable or extremely dangerous. Probably both. The storm broke on the morning of the third day. They emerged from the shack into a world transformed, everything buried under 3 feet of fresh snow, sun blazing off white landscape hard enough to hurt the eyes. The ride back to the Thornton Ranch took twice as long as it should have, their horses struggling through drifts that sometimes came up to their bellies. News of Eliza's decision reached town before she did. By the time she rode in 2 days later to meet with Wallace Crane about an extension she knew he wouldn't grant, half of Black Ridge was waiting in the street. Not to welcome her, to judge her. Sheriff Coleman stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his belt. Miss Thornton, is it true you hired Cade Mercer? I hired 5 men who needed work, yes. A murmur ran through the crowd, half disapproval, half something darker. Are you out of your mind? That was Davies, the rancher who'd tried to run Cade out of town. That man's a killer. You've invited a wolf into your home. He saved my life. So? Doesn't change what he is. And what is he? Eliza's voice cut through the noise. Tell me, Davies, what exactly has Cade Mercer done that you haven't? The rancher's face went red. I ain't killed nobody. You drove the Johnsons off their land last year using hired guns. Don't think I forgot about that. She turned to address the whole crowd. Half of you built your ranches on violence. The other half looked the other way while it happened. But now you're standing here clutching your pearls because I hired a man with a reputation? That's different, someone muttered. How? Explain it to me. Nobody could. Or nobody would. But Eliza could see it in their faces. The fear, the judgment, the certainty that she'd just signed her own death warrant. Miss Thornton, Sheriff Coleman's voice was tired. I can't stop you from hiring who you want, but I'm asking you, as someone who cares about your well-being, to reconsider this decision. I appreciate your concern, Sheriff, but my decision stands. She pushed through the crowd to the bank, feeling their eyes on her back like target practice. Inside, Wallace Crane sat behind his desk with a stack of papers that might as well have been a noose. I assume you're here about the extension, he said. I am. And I assume you know what my answer has to be. Eliza sank into the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted. 2 weeks. She had 2 weeks to somehow produce $1,400 or lose everything her father had built. Impossible odds, but she'd faced those before. What if I could make a payment, she asked. Not the full amount, but enough to show good faith. How much are we talking? 400, maybe 5 if I sell some cattle early. Crane drummed his fingers on the desk, calculating. That's not enough. It's all I have. Then I'm sorry, but wait. Eliza leaned forward. What if I had collateral? Something valuable enough to guarantee the rest? Like what? The ranch is already mortgaged. You don't own anything else worth the north pasture. The banker paused. Explain. 500 acres of prime grazing land with water access. Granger's been trying to buy it for years because it controls the best route to the railroad junction. She spoke fast, idea forming as she went. I sign over temporary rights to you. If I can't make full payment in 60 days, the bank takes that land outright and sells it. If I can make payment, the rights revert and you get your money plus interest. Crane studied her with something between suspicion and reluctant admiration. That's actually not a terrible idea. So we have a deal? Let me talk to the board. I'll have an answer by tomorrow. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Eliza took it and walked out into sunlight that felt too bright after days of storm and shadow. Cade was waiting by her horse, arms crossed, looking like he belonged in a wanted poster. How bad? He asked. Bad, but maybe not fatal. What do you need? She looked at him, really looked. Saw a man who'd survived impossible things, who'd led men through violence and loss, who'd risked everything to save two strangers he didn't know. Can you turn 4 exhausted riders into a crew that can work a ranch twice the size it should be? Probably. Can you do it in 2 weeks? That's a different question. Cade. She waited until he met her eyes. I need the impossible. Can you deliver it? For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he smiled. That same small thing she'd seen in the shack, the one that transformed his face. Impossible's what I do best, he said. And right there, in the middle of Black Ridge's main street with half the town watching like they were witnessing a disaster in slow motion, Eliza Thornton made a choice that would either save her ranch or destroy it completely. She decided to trust him. Behind her, she didn't see Silas Granger watching from the window of the Silver Dollar Saloon, his expression calculating and cold. She didn't see him send one of his men riding hard toward his ranch. And she definitely didn't see the trap that was already being set, the one that would test whether Eliza and Cade could actually survive what came next, or if Black Ridge Valley was about to claim 2 more casualties in a war most people pretended wasn't happening. The storm had passed, but the real danger was just beginning. The first thing Cade did was fire 2 of Eliza's existing ranch hands. She found out about it when she walked into the bunkhouse 3 days after hiring him and saw Tom Fletcher and his cousin packing their belongings into worn saddlebags. Fletcher had worked for her father for 6 years, his cousin for 3. What the hell is going on? Eliza demanded. Cade stood near the door, arms crossed. They're leaving. I can see that. Why? Because I told them to. Fletcher turned, face twisted with anger. Your new boss here says we're not pulling our weight, says we're lazy, incompetent. I said you were sabotaging the operation, Cade interrupted calmly. There's a difference. Eliza's stomach dropped. Tom, is that true? Of course it ain't true. This man shows up out of nowhere, thinks he can... Your fence repairs have been falling apart for weeks, Cade said. Always the same sections, the ones that border Granger's land. Last night I found fresh tool marks on posts that were supposedly fixed 3 days ago. Someone's been cutting them halfway through so they collapse in the next storm. Fletcher's face went red. That's a damn lie. And your cousin here? Cade nodded toward the younger man. He's been disappearing every 3rd night. Comes back smelling like whiskey and Granger's cigars. The cousin wouldn't meet Eliza's eyes. That told her everything. Get out, she said quietly. Miss Thornton, you can't seriously believe... I said get out, both of you, now! Fletcher grabbed his bag, shouldered past her hard enough that she stumbled. At the door, he turned back. You're making a mistake trusting this killer. Granger's going to bury you, and when he does, don't expect any help from folks who actually cared about your father. Then they were gone, boots crunching through snow that had started falling again. Eliza stood in the empty bunkhouse, feeling the walls close in. 2 more hands gone. That left her with Samuel, Cade, and his 4 men, barely enough to run a ranch a quarter this size. You should have told me first, she said. Would you have believed me? I don't know. But firing people without asking, I didn't fire them. I gave them a choice. Leave now or I document everything they've done and take it to the sheriff. Cade's voice stayed level. They chose to leave. Because they're guilty or because you scared them. Does it matter? She wanted to argue. Wanted to defend men who'd worked for her family, wanted to believe this wasn't as bad as it seemed. But she'd already seen too much of how Granger operated. Slow pressure, strategic sabotage, turning people against each other until the whole thing collapsed from within. How long have they been working for him? She asked. Fletcher? Maybe a year. The cousin longer, I'd guess, based on how comfortable he was lying. Cade moved to the window, watching the 2 men ride away. You want to save this ranch, you need to accept something hard. What's that? Some of the people you trust are already against you. The words hit like a fist, because he was right. She'd been so focused on the external threats, the debt, the weather, Granger's reputation, that she'd missed the rot inside her own operation. Who else? She asked. Who else is compromised? Don't know yet, but I'll find out. Over the next week, Cade transformed the Thornton Ranch into something Eliza barely recognized. He had his men up before dawn, working through routines that looked more like military drills than ranch work. They repaired every inch of damaged fence, reinforced the barn walls, organized the tool shed with brutal efficiency. One of them, a quiet man named Cole, who'd lost half his left ear to frostbite, turned out to be exceptional with horses. Within 3 days, he'd gentled 2 animals everyone had written off as untrainable. Another, a Mexican rider named Esteban, knew cattle better than anyone Eliza had ever met. He could read the herd's mood from 100 yards out, predict which animals were getting sick before symptoms showed, estimate weight by sight alone. The third, a kid barely older than Samuel named James, worked harder than any 2 men combined. He was trying to prove something, to himself, to Cade, to the world. Eliza understood that impulse better than she wanted to admit. And the fourth, a scarred giant called Bear, who spoke maybe 10 words a day, turned out to be an absolute artist with a hammer and saw. He rebuilt the bunkhouse's collapsed corner in an afternoon, reinforced the barn's sagging roof, and constructed a new storage shed that looked better than anything her father had built. But it was Cade himself who surprised her most. She'd expected a hard man, maybe cruel, definitely violent when pushed. What she got was someone methodical, patient, and strangely careful with the younger workers. He taught Samuel how to track game through snow, showed him which plants could keep you alive if you got stranded, explained wind patterns and weather signs in a way that made the kid actually pay attention. "You're good with him," Eliza said one evening, watching Cade demonstrate proper knife maintenance to her brother. "He reminds me of someone." "Who?" Cade didn't answer, just returned his focus to the blade. But later, when Samuel was asleep and the others had retreated to the bunkhouse, he spoke quietly. "Had a younger brother once. Taught him everything I knew about surviving out here." His hand stilled on the whetstone. Wasn't enough. Eliza waited, but he didn't elaborate. Some stories didn't need finishing. You could hear the ending in the silence. 10 days after hiring Cade, Eliza rode into Black Ridge to make her partial payment to the bank. The town felt different now, colder. She'd been ostracized before, after her father's death, after she'd refused to sell. But this was worse. This was active hostility. The blacksmith refused to shoe her horse. The general store suddenly had no flour, no coffee, no supplies of any kind. Even the church ladies who used to bring food after funerals crossed the street to avoid her. Wallace Crane met her in his office with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I have $420, Eliza said, setting the cash on his desk. "That's my good faith payment." Crane counted it slowly. "The board approved your proposal. You have 60 days from today to make full payment, or the North Pasture transfers to the bank." "I understand. Do you?" He leaned back. "Miss Thornton, I'm going to be honest with you. The board only approved this because half of them are betting you'll fail, and that land's worth 3 times what you owe. They see this as an investment." "Let me guess. Granger's already made an offer to buy it if I default." The banker's silence was answer enough. Eliza stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Mr. Crane, can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "Why are you helping me, even a little bit? Everyone else in this town wants me gone." Crane was quiet for a long moment, fingers drumming on his desk. "Your father and I went to war together. Virginia, 1862. He saved my life at Antietam, carried me 2 miles with a bullet in his shoulder and half the Confederate army on our heels." He met her eyes. "I owe him. This is the only way I can pay that debt." "By giving me enough rope to hang myself?" "By giving you a chance. What you do with it is up to you." She left before he could see her hands shaking. Outside, the afternoon sun was already dropping toward the mountains, temperature falling with it. Eliza untied her horse and was preparing to mount when she heard the voice. "Miss Thornton." She turned to find Silas Granger himself standing on the boardwalk, dressed like he was heading to a funeral. Mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of face that probably looked trustworthy to people who didn't know better. "Mr. Granger? I heard about your arrangement with the bank. Clever solution." He descended the steps slowly. "Your father would have been proud." "You didn't know my father." "I knew him better than you think. We had business dealings over the years." "You mean the deals where you undercut his prices and blocked his shipping routes?" Granger smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Competition's part of ranching, Miss Thornton. Nothing personal." Driving him through a mountain pass in a blizzard felt pretty personal. "I don't control the weather, or the choices other men make." He stepped closer, voice dropping. but I do control quite a bit else in this valley, which is why I'm here with an offer. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet. Don't need to. $3,000, Granger said. Cash, today, for the ranch and all assets. That's twice what the land's worth, and we both know it. Eliza laughed, sharp, bitter. You think I'm that desperate? I think you're that smart. Take the money, Miss Thornton. Start over somewhere easier, somewhere that doesn't break women like you. Women like me? Stubborn, proud, fighting battles you can't win. His expression shifted, became almost sympathetic. I've seen this story before. It doesn't end well. Then I guess you'll be surprised by the ending. She mounted her horse, but Granger caught the bridle. One more thing, he said quietly. That man you hired, Cade Mercer. Do you know what he really is? A good worker. A killer. And not the noble kind. The Red Creek Massacre? He didn't just survive it, he started it. I don't believe you. Ask him. Ask him what really happened in that canyon and why 19 men died while he walked away. Granger released her horse. You're playing with fire, Miss Thornton. Eventually, you're going to get burned. She rode out of town with those words echoing in her head, hating that they'd gotten under her skin. Hating more that part of her wanted to know if they were true. The ride back to the ranch took 2 hours through snow that was falling heavier now, big wet flakes that clung to everything. By the time Eliza arrived, night had fallen and the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. She found Cade in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal any day. We need to talk, she said. He looked up from the horse, read something in her expression. About what? Red Creek. His face went carefully blank. Who'd you talk to? Granger. He said, I know what he said. Cade stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. And you want to know if it's true. Is it? For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he walked past her, out into the falling snow. Eliza followed, frustration building. You can't just walk away from this conversation. I'm not. He stopped near the corral fence, gripping the top rail hard enough his knuckles went white. You want the truth? Fine. Red Creek was supposed to be a simple drive, 2,400 head through Blackfoot territory. The ranchers who hired me said they'd negotiated safe passage. They lied. What happened? We got ambushed in a canyon pass, but it wasn't random. The whole thing was a setup. His voice stayed flat, mechanical. The ranchers had underpaid some tribe members, promised the rest to others, created a situation where violence was inevitable. They wanted it, needed it, actually. Why? Insurance fraud, lose the herd to hostile natives, collect triple the value from East Coast investors who'd never know the difference. He finally looked at her. I figured it out too late. Tried to negotiate, offered to pay the tribe what they were actually owed. But by then, everyone was armed and angry and scared. Someone fired first, still don't know who. After that, he trailed off, but Eliza could fill in the blanks. Chaos, panic, men dying in a canyon that became a killing ground. How'd you survive? She asked quietly. Got lucky. Found a side passage, managed to get 4 men out before the whole thing collapsed. His jaw tightened. The ranchers blamed me. Said I'd picked a bad route, ignored warnings, got their men killed. They spread that story everywhere, made sure it stuck. And I let them. Because proving they'd orchestrated a massacre meant admitting I'd been stupid enough to miss it until people were already dead. That's why you've been drifting. That's why nobody wants to hire me. Who wants a trail boss with 19 dead men on his conscience? Snow fell between them, accumulating on Cade's shoulders like he was turning into part of the landscape. Eliza studied his face, the lines carved by weather and guilt, the way he held himself like a man expecting punishment. I don't care, she said. He blinked. What? About your past? About Red Creek? About whatever mistakes you made or didn't make? She stepped closer. You saved my life. You've worked harder in 2 weeks than most men work in a month, and you're the only person in this entire valley who's been honest with me. That's what matters. Eliza, I'm not asking you to be perfect, Cade. I'm asking you to help me save my ranch. Can you do that? He looked at her like she'd offered him something he didn't know how to accept. Finally, he nodded. Yeah, I can do that. Then the past stays in the past. She left him standing in the snow and went inside, her heart pounding with something between fear and determination. Behind her, she didn't see the way Cade stared after her, or the small expression of something like hope that crossed his face before he buried it again. But she felt it, that strange current between people who've both been beaten down and refused to stay there. The next morning, everything changed. Eliza woke to shouting. She grabbed her rifle and ran outside to find the main barn engulfed in flames, fire roaring 30 feet into the pre-dawn darkness. Cade and his men were already there, throwing buckets of snow onto the blaze while horses screamed in panic from the corral. "Get the animals out," Cade shouted. "Forget the building." They worked like demons, hauling terrified horses into the open, beating back flames with wet blankets, forming a bucket line from the well. By the time they got the fire contained, the barn was a smoking ruin, and the sun was rising over a scene of absolute destruction. Eliza stood in the wreckage, staring at charred timbers that represented weeks of stored feed, equipment they couldn't afford to replace, and the last of her father's careful planning. "This wasn't an accident," Cade said, crouching near what used to be the main door. He held up a broken whiskey bottle, the glass melted but still recognizable. "Someone set this." "Granger?" "Probably, or someone working for him." Samuel appeared from the house, face pale. "Eliza, you need to see this." He led them to the corral where they'd been keeping the breeding stock, 20 head of prime cattle that represented their best chance at recovering financially. The gate hung open. The corral was empty. "They took them," Samuel's voice cracked. "All of them. Just gone." Eliza felt something break inside her. Not collapse. Breaking would have been easier. This was more like a crack running through frozen glass, the kind that meant the whole thing was about to shatter. "How many can we replace?" she asked. Cade shook his head. "Not without money you don't have." "Then we're finished." "Not yet." She turned on him, anger finally breaking through the shock. "Look around, Cade. The barn's destroyed, the cattle are gone, and I've got less than 50 days to make a payment I couldn't afford even before all this. We're done." "No, we're not." He grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You want to give up? Fine. Sell to Granger. Take whatever he's offering, walk away. But don't tell me you're finished when you're just scared." "I'm not scared, I'm being realistic. You're terrified. I can see it. And that's okay. Fear's not the problem. Quitting is." "What do you want me to do?" She was shouting now, past caring who heard. "Pull cattle out of thin air? Rebuild a barn with no money? Fight a man who owns half the territory?" "Yes." The simple answer stopped her cold. "That's exactly what I want you to do," Cade continued. "Because you're Eliza Thornton, the woman who rode through a blizzard to check fence line, who hired 5 strangers everyone said would kill her, who looked the most powerful man in Montana in the eye and told him to go to hell." He released her shoulders. "You're not realistic. You're a fighter, so fight." For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then something shifted. That crack in the glass didn't shatter. It froze solid, became part of the structure instead of a weakness. "All right," she said quietly. "Then we need a plan." They gathered in the ranch house, Eliza, Cade, his 4 men, and Samuel. Spread across the table was everything they had left: a map of the territory, an accounting of their remaining assets, and the cold math of their situation. "We've got 48 days, Eliza started. "We need $1,400 to keep the ranch, plus enough to survive spring. Without the breeding stock, we can't rebuild the herd fast enough to sell at market. So we need another approach." "What about the north pasture?" Samuel asked. "Could we sell grazing rights just for the season?" "Granger would undercut any price we offered. No one would lease from us." Esteban spoke up, his accent thick but his English clear. "What about the mineral rights?" Everyone looked at him. "What mineral rights?" Eliza asked. "Your father, he told me once there was copper in the hills north of here. Said a surveyor found traces 20 years back, but the vein was too small to mine profitably." Esteban shrugged. "Maybe things have changed. Copper's worth more now." Cade leaned forward. "How much more?" "Triple what it was. Railroads are expanding, telegraph lines going up everywhere. There's a shortage." "So if we could prove there's a viable deposit," Eliza's mind was racing now, "we could sell the mineral rights without selling the land itself." "Or lease them," Cade added. "Long-term contract, steady income." It was a long shot. More than a long shot. But it was something. "How do we even find out if there's enough copper to matter?" Samuel asked. "We dig," Cade said simply. Old-fashioned prospecting. I've done it before up in Colorado. It's hard work, but everything's hard work, Eliza interrupted. At least this gives us a chance. They spent the rest of the day planning. Cade and Bear would lead the prospecting effort, taking equipment salvaged from the barn and heading into the northern hills. Cole and James would handle the remaining livestock, keeping them alive through what was shaping up to be a brutal late winter. Esteban and Samuel would repair what could be saved of the ranch infrastructure, and Eliza would handle the things she'd been avoiding. She would go back to Black Ridge and start building alliances. "You'll need leverage," Cade said that night, after the others had gone to sleep. "Granger's already turned most of the town against you. Asking for help won't work." "I'm not asking for help. I'm offering a partnership." "With who?" "The families Granger's been squeezing. The small homesteaders, the immigrant farmers, the widows trying to hold on to land their husbands died for." She pulled out a list she'd been compiling, names written in careful script. "There are at least 15 families in the same position I'm in. If we unite, pool resources, present a united front, Granger will crush you all at once instead of one at a time. Maybe. Or maybe we become too big to crush." Cade studied the list, then looked at her with something like admiration. "You're talking about starting a war. I'm talking about survival. If that means war, then so be it." He smiled, that rare, genuine thing that transformed his whole face. "You know, when I first saw you in town, I thought you were just another stubborn rancher's daughter who'd break under pressure. And now? Now I think Granger has no idea what he's up against." 3 days later, Eliza rode into Black Ridge with a proposal that would either save the valley's struggling settlers or get them all destroyed. She started with the Johnsons, the family Davies had driven off their land the previous year. They were living in a boarding house now, the husband working as a stable hand, the wife taking in laundry. They had nothing left to lose. "You want us to what?" Mrs. Johnson asked, incredulous. "Pool resources, shared labor, shared profits, shared protection. The only way we survive is together." "And how exactly does that stop Granger?" "It makes us too expensive to destroy one at a time. Right now he picks us off individually, but if we're united, if attacking one of us means attacking all of us, the risk gets too high." Mr. Johnson shook his head. "That's crazy talk. Granger owns this valley. He owns parts of it, not all of it, not yet." Eliza leaned forward. "I'm not promising this'll work. I'm not even promising we'll survive. But I'm promising that if we go down fighting, together." They didn't commit, but they didn't say no either. She got similar responses from the Kowalskis, Polish immigrants who'd been denied credit at every store in town. From the widow Martinez, whose late husband's ranch was being bled dry by mysterious cattle thefts. From old man Henderson, who'd survived the Civil War only to watch Granger's men destroy his irrigation system. By the end of the week, she had 7 families willing to meet. Not commit, just meet. It was a start. The meeting happened in the Thornton Ranch house on a Friday night. 14 people crammed into a space meant for 6. They were scared, desperate, and deeply suspicious of each other. Generations of competition didn't disappear just because they were all getting destroyed. Eliza stood before them, feeling the weight of every skeptical eye. "I know most of you don't trust me," she started. "Hell, half of you probably think I'm as crazy as everyone says. But here's what I know. Granger's been systematically taking control of this valley for years. He blocks access to water, undercuts prices, buys out banks, and makes damn sure anyone who opposes him either falls in line or falls apart." "We know all this," Henderson interrupted. "What's your point?" "My point is we can't fight him individually, but we can collectively." She unrolled a map across the table. "Look, between all of us we control 13,000 acres. That's a third of the arable land in the valley. If we coordinate, share equipment, combine our herds, negotiate prices as a single entity, we become powerful enough that Granger can't just make us disappear." "Or we become a bigger target," Mrs. Johnson said. "We're already targets. At least this way we shoot back." The arguments went on for hours. Some people wanted more guarantees. Others wanted bigger shares. A few just wanted to vent about everything they'd lost. But slowly, grudgingly, something started to form. Not agreement, not yet, but possibility. By midnight, they'd hammered out the basics. A cooperative structure where families maintained ownership of their land but shared resources and profits. Decisions would be made collectively. Threats would be answered collectively. And if Granger came for one of them, he'd have to deal with all of them. "We'll need a name," Esteban said. "Black Ridge Cattlemen's Alliance," Henderson suggested. "Too formal," Martinez countered. "Makes us sound like we're pretending to be something we're not." "What about the Valley Union?" Samuel offered quietly. Everyone turned to look at the kid. He shrank back, then forced himself to stand straighter. "We're not just cattlemen. We're farmers, homesteaders, families. And we're from the whole valley, not just Black Ridge. So, Valley Union. Simple. True." Eliza felt pride surge through her chest. Her little brother, finding his voice at exactly the right moment. "I like it," she said. One by one, the others nodded. The Valley Union was born, but birth was just the beginning. The real test would be survival. News of the Union spread through Black Ridge like a grass fire. By the next morning, the whole town knew. By afternoon, Silas Granger knew. His response came 3 days later. Eliza was working on repairs to the corral when she saw the riders coming, 6 men, all armed, moving with the casual confidence of people who knew they had the power. "Inside," Cade said quietly, appearing at her elbow. "Now." "I'm not hiding. I didn't say hide. I said inside, where we have cover and clear sight lines." They moved to the ranch house, where Cade positioned his men at windows. Cole had a rifle. Bear had a shotgun. Even Samuel held a pistol, though his hands shook slightly. The riders stopped 50 yards out. Their leader, a man Eliza recognized as Granger's foreman, a bastard named Pike, sat his horse like he owned the ground beneath it. "Miss Thornton," he called. "Mr. Granger wants a word." Eliza stepped onto the porch, deliberately leaving her rifle inside. Show of good faith, however fake. "So talk," she said. "Not with me. With him. He's requesting a meeting, tomorrow, his ranch, just you." "Why would I agree to that?" Pike smiled, and it was an ugly thing. "Because if you don't, we start visiting your new friends in the Union. Might be some unfortunate accidents, barn fires, sick cattle, that sort of thing." Behind Eliza, she heard Cade shift position. Knew he was calculating range, wind, probability. Knew that if she gave the word, this would turn violent in seconds. "Tell Granger I'll be there," she said. "Noon tomorrow." "Smart choice." Pike and his men rode off, leaving tension thick enough to choke on. "You're not actually going," Cade said once they were out of earshot. "Of course I am. It's obviously a trap. Everything's a trap. Doesn't mean I can avoid them all." "Eliza, he wants to intimidate me, Cade. Make me feel small and powerless. If I don't show, he wins." She turned to face him. "But if I do show, if I walk into his territory without fear, it sends a different message." "What message?" "That he can't scare me anymore." Cade looked like he wanted to argue, then realized he was dealing with someone just as stubborn as he was. "Fine, but I'm coming with you." He said alone. "He can shove his conditions. You go, I go." This time, Eliza didn't argue. The next day dawned cold and clear, the kind of weather that felt like the sky itself was watching. Eliza and Cade rode out at 11, giving themselves plenty of time to reach Granger's ranch by noon. The spread was impressive. 10,000 acres of prime land, a main house that looked like something out of Virginia, barns and outbuildings that could have housed a small army. Granger had built an empire, and he wanted everyone to know it. They were met at the gate by armed men who escorted them to the main house. Inside, the luxury was almost obscene. Persian rugs, oil paintings, furniture shipped from back east at prices that could have fed a family for a year. Granger waited in his study, sitting behind a desk the size of a dinner table. "Miss Thornton, Mr. Mercer." He gestured to chairs. "Please, sit." "I'll stand," Eliza said. "Suit yourself." Granger poured himself whiskey from a crystal decanter. "I hear you've been busy. Starting a union, gathering the desperate and the foolish. Quite the accomplishment." "Is there a point to this meeting?" "The point is I'm giving you one last chance to avoid a great deal of suffering." He sipped his drink. "Disband the union. Sell me your ranch. Take the money and leave. Do that, and I'll leave your friends alone." "And if I refuse?" "Then I destroy you. Slowly. Methodically. I'll break every family that joined you, burn every barn, poison every well. And when you're all bankrupt and broken, I'll buy your land for pennies and forget you ever existed. Eliza felt rage building in her chest, hot and bright. You really think you can get away with this? I already have. For years. Granger set down his glass. This valley belongs to me, Miss Thornton. The only question is how much pain you want to endure before accepting that fact. Here's what I think, Eliza said quietly. I think you're scared. Granger's eyebrow rose. Excuse me? The Valley Union terrifies you, because for the first time you're facing organized resistance, people who won't just roll over and die. And you know that if we succeed, if we actually build something together, your whole empire collapses. You're delusional. Am I? Then why meet with me at all? Why not just destroy us if you're so powerful? She leaned forward. I'll tell you why. Because you can't. Not without consequences you're not prepared to face. Not anymore. For a long moment, Granger just stared at her. Then he smiled, cold, calculated. You know what I admire about you, Miss Thornton? Your spirit. Really, it's remarkable. Which is why it'll be such a shame to break it. He stood. This meeting is over. You've made your choice. Now live with it. Eliza and Cade were escorted out by silent men with hard eyes. As they mounted their horses, Pike appeared one more time. One more thing, he said. Tell that Mexican in your crew to watch his back. Granger doesn't like foreigners much. Might be he has an accident soon. Cade's hand moved toward his gun, but Eliza caught his arm. Don't, she murmured. Not worth it. They rode away from Granger's ranch with the weight of a declared war settling onto their shoulders. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She stood on the ranch house porch, watching stars that seemed impossibly far away, and wondered if she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. Second thoughts? Cade asked, materializing from the darkness. 100 thoughts. He leaned against the railing beside her. Still time to back out. Is it, though? We've already started this. The union exists. People are depending on me. People always depend on someone. Doesn't mean you have to carry them. She looked at him, really looked. Why are you still here, Cade? You could leave tomorrow. Take your men. Find work somewhere easier. This isn't your fight, isn't it? No, it's mine. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the mountains that ringed the valley like prison walls. I told you about Red Creek, about the men who died because I wasn't smart enough to see the trap. What I didn't tell you is what happened after. Eliza waited. I spent 2 years hunting the ranchers who set it up, tracked them across 3 territories, waited for moments when they were vulnerable, and He stopped, jaw working. I was going to kill them, all of them, make them pay for what they'd done. What stopped you? I realized it wouldn't bring anyone back, wouldn't fix anything. I'd just be another killer adding to the pile of bodies this frontier's built on. He finally met her eyes. This ranch, this fight you're in, it's a chance to build something instead of destroy it, to prove that violence isn't the only answer out here. So yeah, it is my fight. Because I need it to be. Something passed between them in that moment, understanding deeper than words. 2 people broken by the same harsh world, trying to put themselves back together by saving something worth saving. Granger's going to come at us hard, Eliza said. Soon. I know. People are going to get hurt, maybe killed. I know that too. And we might lose anyway. We might. Cade straightened, facing her fully. But we're going to make him bleed for every inch. And when it's over, win or lose, he's going to know he was in a fight. Eliza extended her hand. Partners? He took it. Partners. They stood there on that porch, 2 people against an empire, and prepared for war. Granger's retaliation came faster than expected. 2 days after the meeting at his ranch, the Martinez family woke to find their entire water supply contaminated. Someone had dumped rotting animal carcasses into their well during the night. The smell alone was enough to make you sick, but the real damage was deeper. Without clean water, their cattle would die within a week. Eliza got the news at dawn from Martinez's oldest son, who rode his horse nearly to death reaching the Thornton ranch. My father says we're leaving, the boy gasped, barely 16 and trying not to cry. Says the union isn't worth dying for. Where is he now? Eliza asked, already moving toward her horse. Home. Packing. We're heading to my uncle's place in Wyoming. She made it to the Martinez spread by mid-morning, Cade riding hard beside her. They found the family loading a wagon with everything they could carry, faces hollow with defeat. Diego, Eliza called out. Wait. Martinez didn't even look at her. This is your fault. That union you started, it painted a target on all of us. Granger would have come for you anyway. You know that. Maybe, but at least I wouldn't have gotten my hopes up first. He threw another bag into the wagon. Go away, Miss Thornton. You've done enough. We can fix the well, dig a new one, deeper. With what money? What equipment? Finally, he turned to face her. You're fighting a war you can't win, and I won't sacrifice my family for your pride. There was nothing she could say to that, nothing that wouldn't sound hollow or desperate. So she watched the Martinez family pack up 30 years of their lives and leave Black Ridge Valley, becoming one more casualty in Granger's slow conquest. That's one, Cade said quietly as they rode back. How many others you think will break? All of them, if we don't find a way to fight back. But fighting back required resources they didn't have and time they were running out of. The prospecting in the northern hills had yielded promising signs. Cade and Bear had found copper traces in 3 different locations, but nothing substantial enough to guarantee mineral rights would sell. And even if they did find a viable deposit, there wasn't enough time to negotiate deals before the bank payment came due. Eliza was running the numbers for the 100th time when Samuel burst into the ranch house, face flushed with excitement. You need to see this, he said. She followed him to the barn where Cade stood beside an old trunk covered in dust and cobwebs. It had been shoved in the corner for as long as Eliza could remember, filled with her father's old papers and documents she'd never bothered sorting through. Found this wedged under some floorboards, Cade said, holding up a leather-bound ledger. Your father kept records, detailed ones. Eliza took the book, flipped it open. Her father's handwriting filled page after page. Dates, transactions, payments made and received. Normal ranch accounting. Then she reached the section from 5 years ago and stopped cold. Is this what I think it is? She asked. Depends on what you think it is. The entries detailed payments from Silas Granger to various officials throughout the territory. Judges, land assessors, railroad commissioners. Some amounts were small, $50 here, $100 there. Others ran into the thousands. And next to each payment, her father had written notes explaining what the bribes were for. Falsified land surveys to justify seizures. Favorable court rulings in property disputes. Delayed railroad expansion to keep competitors from accessing shipping routes. Years of systematic corruption, all documented in her father's careful script. Why did he record all this? Samuel asked. Insurance, Cade said. Your father knew what Granger was. Probably kept this in case he ever needed leverage. And now we have it. Eliza felt something dangerous kindle in her chest. This could destroy Granger, prove he's been operating through fraud and bribery for years. Could also get you killed, Cade pointed out. Men like Granger don't let evidence like this survive. Then we make copies. Multiple copies, hidden in different locations. We make it so killing us would only ensure this gets published. Her mind was racing now, seeing possibilities where before there'd only been walls. We use this to force him into a stalemate. He leaves the union alone. We keep his secrets. Blackmail, Samuel said. That's what you're talking about. I'm talking about survival. Cade studied her face, reading something there that made him nod slowly. All right, but we do this smart. We don't just threaten him. We set up a dead man switch. Evidence gets delivered to every newspaper in Montana if anything happens to any union member. Can we actually do that? Yeah, I know a lawyer in Helena owes me a favor. He can arrange it. Cade closed the ledger carefully. But understand something. Once we go down this road, there's no walking it back. Granger will know we have this, and he'll do everything in his power to get it back. He's already doing everything in his power to destroy us. This'll make it personal. Eliza looked at the ledger, at the evidence of corruption that had controlled the valley for years, and made her decision. Good. I want it personal. Over the next week, they moved with careful precision. Cade rode to Helena with the ledger, spent 3 days with the lawyer setting up arrangements that would automatically release the documents if certain conditions were met. Meanwhile, Eliza called an emergency union meeting, gathering the remaining families, the Johnsons, Kowalskis, Henderson, and 4 others who hadn't fled yet, to explain what they'd found. This is dangerous, Mrs. Johnson said after hearing the plan. You're talking about threatening the most powerful man in the territory. I'm talking about defending ourselves with the only weapon that might actually work. Or it backfires and gets us all killed. That's possible, Eliza admitted. Which is why I'm not asking any of you to be part of this. If you want to distance yourselves from the Union, do it now. No hard feelings. Nobody moved, not because they were brave, several looked terrified, but because they'd already committed, already painted targets on their backs. There was nowhere left to run that Granger's reach wouldn't eventually find them. So what do we do? Henderson asked. We prepare for war, real war. Granger's been hitting us with sabotage and intimidation. Once he learns about the ledger, he'll escalate. We need to be ready. That's when Cade outlined his plan. They would turn the Thornton Ranch into a defensible position, stockpile supplies, train everyone who could hold a weapon. The other Union families would do the same at their own properties, creating a network of strongholds throughout the valley. If Granger attacked one, the others would respond. You're talking about turning our homes into fortresses, Kowalski said, his accent making the words sound even grimmer. I'm talking about staying alive long enough to win. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing. Cade worked the men like soldiers, teaching them basic tactics, drilling them on defensive positions, showing them how to reinforce buildings against attack. Bear constructed barricades and firing positions. Cole organized supply caches, food, ammunition, medical supplies, hidden throughout each property. The women weren't excluded. Eliza insisted everyone learn to shoot, to handle basic first aid, to understand how to move quickly when violence erupted. Mrs. Johnson turned out to be a terrifyingly good marksman. Mrs. Kowalski could reload a rifle faster than most men could fire one. And Samuel, who'd always been the quiet kid in his sister's shadow, emerged as something unexpected. He had a mind for logistics, for understanding how supplies moved and where vulnerabilities existed. Cade started relying on him to coordinate between the different Union properties, and the kid rose to it. He's growing up, Cade said one evening, watching Samuel organize a supply run with the efficiency of someone twice his age. Too fast, Eliza replied. He should be worrying about school and girls, not ammunition counts and defensive positions. None of us got to be what we should be. We'd just become what we need to. It was late February when Cade returned from Helena with confirmation that the dead man's switch was active. Every major newspaper from Billings to San Francisco had sealed documents waiting in lawyers' offices, ready to be opened if any Union member died under suspicious circumstances or if Eliza failed to check in monthly. That same day, Eliza sent a message to Granger. Short, direct, impossible to misunderstand. We have your ledger. We have your crimes. Leave us alone, or everyone knows what you are. The response came 2 days later, delivered by Pike and a dozen armed men who stopped at the border of Thornton property without crossing it. Pike held up a white cloth. Not quite a flag of truce, but close enough. Granger wants to talk, he shouted. Neutral ground. Tomorrow at noon, the old church at the crossroads. Tell him I'll be there, Eliza called back. After they left, Cade turned to her with murder in his eyes. You're not actually considering this. Of course I am. Eliza, this is exactly how people get killed. Neutral ground doesn't mean safe ground. It means he's scared. Scared enough to negotiate instead of just attacking. She checked her rifle, began cleaning it with movements born from weeks of practice. I'm going. And before you argue, yes, you're coming with me. So is Bear and James. We go armed, we go careful, but we go. And if it's a trap, then we spring it, knowing what we're walking into. The old church sat at a crossroads 5 miles from anywhere, abandoned since the previous minister died and no replacement came. It was stone and timber, sturdy but decaying, surrounded by snow-covered graves of people nobody remembered anymore. Eliza arrived with Cade, Bear, and James, all armed and alert. Granger was already there with Pike and 4 men of his own, standing in the church's shadow like they were posing for a funeral photograph. Miss Thornton, Granger said as she dismounted, thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries. You wanted to talk. Talk. Very well. The ledger. I want it back. Not happening. I'm prepared to make this worth your while. Name your price. There's no price. That ledger stays exactly where it is. Insurance against you trying to destroy us. Granger's jaw tightened. You're playing a dangerous game. Says the man who's been cheating for 20 years. Everything I've done to build this valley, to bring order and prosperity to a lawless territory. You've built an empire on fraud and violence. Don't dress it up as civilization. For a long moment, they stared at each other across snow-covered ground. Two people who'd reached the edge of negotiation and found nothing but the cliff beyond it. "I could kill you right now," Granger said quietly. "All of you. Bury the bodies where they'd never be found." "You could try," Cade replied, hand resting on his pistol. "Might succeed. But I guarantee you don't walk away clean. And then those documents get released anyway, destroying everything you've built." Granger's eyes shifted to Cade, really seeing him for the first time. The infamous Cade Mercer. "Tell me, how many men have you killed? 10? 20? Enough to know when someone's bluffing." "Am I bluffing?" "Yeah, you wouldn't have called this meeting if you were willing to risk exposure. You want that ledger back because you know it ends you. So here's what's going to happen. You leave the Valley Union alone. You stop the sabotage, stop the intimidation, stop trying to starve us out. Do that, and your secrets stay buried." "And if I refuse?" "Then we publish," Eliza said. "Every newspaper in Montana gets your crimes delivered by week's end. You'll be investigated, probably indicted. Even if you escape prosecution, you'll be destroyed financially and socially. Everything you've built turns to ash." Granger looked between them, calculating odds, measuring risks. Finally, he nodded slowly. "You win. This round." He turned toward his horse, then paused. "But understand something, Miss Thornton. This valley belongs to me. It always has. It always will. You've bought yourself time, nothing more. And when that time runs out, I will take everything you love and burn it to the ground." "I'll be waiting," Eliza replied. They rode away from that crossroads, feeling the weight of a temporary peace that everyone knew wouldn't last. Granger would regroup, find another angle, come at them from a direction they hadn't anticipated. But for now, they'd bought breathing room, or so they thought. The attack came on the night of March 15th, during the worst blizzard to hit Montana territory in 30 years. Eliza woke to the sound of gunfire and Samuel screaming her name. She grabbed her rifle and stumbled from her bedroom into chaos. The ranch house windows were shattered. Smoke poured through cracks in the walls. Outside, the night was alive with muzzle flashes and shouting men. "They're everywhere!" Samuel shouted, crouched beneath a window with a pistol he was reloading with shaking hands. "They hit us from 3 sides. An explosion cut him off. The main barn erupted in flames, fire roaring into the sky despite snow that should have smothered it. They'd used accelerant, Eliza realized. Planned this for maximum destruction. "Where's Cade?" she demanded. "Outside. He took Bear and Cole to the north fence." Another explosion, this one closer. Part of the bunkhouse collapsed, timbers crashing in a spray of sparks and burning wood. Eliza moved to the window, risked a glance out. Through smoke and snow, she could see riders circling the ranch, firing at anything that moved. At least 24 men, maybe more. This wasn't sabotage. This was an army. "We can't hold this," Samuel said, voice cracking. "There's too many. Where are the others? The Union families?" "I don't know. The storm cut off communications. We can't reach anyone." A bullet punched through the wall inches from Eliza's head, showering her with splinters. She ducked, mind racing. If the other properties were under attack too, the Union was being destroyed simultaneously. Coordinated, planned. Granger must have been preparing this for weeks, waiting for the perfect storm to cover his assault. "We need to get to the root cellar," she said. "Regroup, figure out—" "No." Cade appeared in the doorway, covered in soot and blood. "We fight." "Cade, look around. We're outnumbered 5-1. "Which is why we can't retreat. We retreat. They burn everything and hunt us down in the snow. We fight. We might take enough of them with us that they pull back." "That's suicide. It's survival." He moved to the shattered window, fired 3 quick shots at shapes moving through smoke. "I've got Bear holding the north approach. Cole's got the east. James is with the horses trying to keep them from bolting. But Esteban—" His voice caught. "Esteban's down. Took a bullet in the first volley. He's alive, but he won't be fighting." Eliza felt something crack inside her chest. Esteban, who'd known more about cattle than anyone she'd ever met, bleeding out while Granger's men destroyed everything around him. "Where is he?" "Bunkhouse. Or what's left of it." She started for the door, but Cade caught her arm. "You go out there, you die. Let me—" "He's my responsibility. My crew. I'm getting him." Before Cade could argue, she was gone, running through snow and smoke toward the burning bunkhouse. Bullets kicked up ice around her feet. Something whistled past her head close enough to feel the heat. But she made it to the collapsed structure and found Esteban pinned under a fallen beam, blood spreading across his shirt in a pattern that made her stomach turn. "Miss Eliza," he gasped. "I'm sorry. I tried to hold them. Save your breath." She tried to lift the beam, couldn't, too heavy. She screamed for help, knowing it was futile in the chaos. Then Bear was there, appearing like a mountain made flesh. He lifted the beam with a grunt of effort that sounded like a landslide, held it while Eliza dragged Esteban free. They got him to the ranch house just as another wave of attackers surged toward the property. "How many times can we repel them?" Samuel asked, firing through the window with surprising calm. "As many as it takes," Cade replied, though his expression suggested he knew the math didn't favor them. They fought through the night like cornered animals, giving ground only when fire forced them back, shooting at shadows and shapes that materialized from smoke. The storm raged around everything, wind howling like it was mourning what was being destroyed. At some point, Eliza lost track of time. Bear took a bullet to the shoulder. Cole caught one in the leg. James kept fighting despite a gash across his forehead that bled into his eyes. And through it all, Cade moved like something possessed, everywhere at once, shooting with mechanical precision, shouting orders that somehow cut through the chaos. Then the ammunition started running low. "I'm out," Samuel called. "Me too," Cole added from his position near the kitchen. Eliza checked her own rifle. 3 bullets left, 3 bullets between them and being overrun. "We need to retreat," she said. "There has to be another way." That's when she heard it. Faint at first, almost lost in the storm, then louder, hoofbeats, lots of them, coming fast from the south. Through the smoke, riders emerged, 20, 30, maybe more. For a terrible moment, Eliza thought it was reinforcements for Granger. Then she saw Mrs. Johnson at the front, rifle raised, leading the charge like something out of a war painting. The Union had come. The families she'd brought together, the settlers who'd been barely holding on, they'd fought through the storm to reach the Thornton Ranch. They hit Granger's men from behind, turning a slaughter into a battle. The attackers tried to regroup, but they were caught between the ranch's defenders and the Union reinforcements. Pike attempted to organize a retreat, but it turned into a rout. Men fled into the blizzard, some on horseback, others on foot, abandoning weapons and equipment in their panic. By dawn, the valley looked like a battlefield. Bodies lay in the snow. Eliza counted 9 of Granger's men dead, more wounded. Her own people had suffered too. 2 of the Johnson boys were hurt badly. Old Man Henderson had taken a bullet to the chest and died before they could get him help. The Kowalskis' youngest daughter had burns from trying to save their supplies. But they'd survived. Battered, bleeding, traumatized, but alive. Eliza stood in the wreckage of what used to be her barn, watching smoke rise into a gray morning sky. Everything she'd fought for, everything her father had built, lay in ruins around her. "We need to pursue them," Cade said, appearing at her elbow. "Track them back to Granger. Finish this before—" "No." He blinked. "No? Look around, Cade. We can barely stand. Half our people are wounded. We're out of ammunition, and winter isn't close to over." She turned to face him. "We pursue Granger now. We're just trading one slaughter for another." "So we let him get away with this?" "I didn't say that, but revenge isn't the same as justice. And right now we need to focus on survival." Cade looked like he wanted to argue, then saw the bodies being laid out in a row, saw the shell-shocked faces of people who'd fought through hell and barely made it out. He nodded slowly. "What do we do then?" "We rebuild. We fortify. And we make damn sure he never catches us unprepared again." Over the next week, the Valley Union transformed from a loose alliance into something harder, something meaner. They buried their dead, treated their wounded, and then got to work building defenses that would have made a military fort jealous. Bear, despite his wounded shoulder, constructed walls and firing positions. Cole organized watches and patrols. The Union families coordinated supply lines, shared resources, created a network that meant an attack on one would bring immediate response from all. And Eliza, standing in the ashes of what used to be her life, made a decision that would change everything. "We're not just defending anymore," she told the gathered families. "We're going after him." "How?" Mrs. Johnson asked. "We barely survived his attack. How do we possibly—" "We find where he's vulnerable and we hit him there. His supply lines, his business contacts, his political connections. Eliza unrolled a map across a makeshift table. Granger's power comes from controlling the valley's economy, so we break that control. Samuel pointed to a location on the map. The railroad junction. Everything Granger ships goes through there. If we could delay or disrupt, we'd cost him thousands in lost contracts, Cade finished. Maybe more. That's still not enough to stop him, Kowalski said. No, but it's a start. Eliza looked around at faces hardened by battle. We hit his shipping. We undercut his prices. We convinced merchants to stop dealing with him exclusively. Death by 1,000 cuts instead of one big battle we can't win. And the ledger? Mrs. Johnson asked. That was supposed to be our insurance. It still is. But Granger proved he's willing to risk exposure if it means destroying us. So we need more than insurance. We need to actually hurt him. They spent hours planning, arguing, refining strategies. Some ideas were too dangerous, others too expensive. But slowly, a campaign emerged, not one battle, but a series of moves designed to weaken Granger's grip on the valley. It was Mrs. Johnson who suggested the most radical idea. What if we bypass the existing markets entirely, she said. Build our own distribution network directly to buyers back east? Everyone stared at her. That's... Henderson started. That's actually brilliant. Crazy, but brilliant. The railroads would never allow it, Kowalski countered. Granger owns the junction. He owns the main junction, Mrs. Johnson interrupted. But there's a secondary line 20 miles north, smaller, older, but functional. Used to handle mining equipment before the copper played out. Eliza felt electricity run through her. If we could negotiate access to that line, we could ship cattle directly to Chicago or Denver, Samuel finished. Cut out all the middlemen Granger controls. It would take capital we don't have, Cade pointed out. Fees, permits, transportation costs. What about the copper? Bear's rumbling voice cut through the discussion. You found deposits in the northern hills, maybe not enough for major mining, but what if there's more than you thought? Everyone turned to look at him. We only prospected 3 sites, Cade said slowly. Gave up when we didn't find immediate payoff. But if we expanded the search, we could find enough to finance the railroad access, Eliza said, pieces falling into place. And even if we don't, the prospect of copper deposits would be enough to secure loans. Investors love mineral rights. This is risky, Henderson warned. You're talking about betting everything on a possibility. Everything's already bet, Eliza replied. We're all in, whether we like it or not. Question is whether we're going to fold or raise. The decision was made. They would prospect the northern hills aggressively, use whatever they found, or claim to have found, to secure financing and build their own distribution network. It was ambitious to the point of madness. But madness was all they had left. That night, as the Union families dispersed to their respective properties, Cade found Eliza standing alone in what used to be the barn, staring at charred timbers. You did good today, he said. Did I? Henderson's dead. Esteban might not walk right again. Half the ranch is burned to the ground. But we're still standing. That counts for something. She turned to face him, and in the moonlight filtering through destroyed walls, he saw tears tracking through soot on her face. I'm so tired, Cade. Tired of fighting, tired of losing, tired of watching people die for a piece of land that maybe isn't worth saving. You don't believe that, don't I? Look at what this valley's cost. My father, Henderson, nearly Samuel, nearly you. Her voice broke. Maybe Granger's right. Maybe this place does belong to him, and I'm just too stubborn to accept it. Cade stepped closer, close enough that she could see the scars on his face, the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried from his own failures. You want to know what I see when I look at you? He asked quietly. I see someone who refused to break when everyone expected her to. Someone who built an alliance from desperate strangers and turned it into something that survived an army. Someone who fights not because she enjoys it, but because surrender would mean betraying everyone who believed in her. That's a lot of pressure. It's also the truth. He reached out, hesitated, then gently wiped soot from her cheek. You're not your father, Eliza. You're something different, something this valley hasn't seen before, and that terrifies Granger more than any ledger ever could. She stared at him, at this man who'd come into her life as a dangerous stranger and become something she hadn't expected. Partner. Protector. Friend. Maybe more, though neither of them had words for what existed between people forged in the same fire. "What if we lose?" she whispered. "Then we lose knowing we fought like hell and made them pay for every inch. That's supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be honest." Eliza laughed, sharp, bitter, but genuine. Then she did something she hadn't allowed herself since her father died. She leaned forward and let someone else carry the weight for just a moment, resting her head against Cade's shoulder while he stood solid and silent in the ruins of everything they were trying to save. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For staying, for fighting, for not letting me give up when giving up would have been easier." "Someone once told me that impossible's what she does best," Cade replied. "Seemed worth sticking around to watch." They stood there in the wreckage, two people against an empire, and prepared for the next round of a war that was far from over. The prospecting in the northern hills went better than anyone expected, which should have been their first warning that something was wrong. Cade and Bear spent 3 weeks working the frozen ground, following copper traces deeper into the mountains. By mid-April, they'd identified 5 viable sites, not enough for industrial mining, but substantial enough to attract serious buyers. The assayer from Helena valued the deposits at somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000, depending on market conditions. It was enough. More than enough to finance the railroad access, secure loans, maybe even pay off the bank early. Eliza was reviewing the assayer's report when Samuel came running into the ranch house, face white with panic. "They took him," he gasped. "They took James." Everything stopped. "Who took him?" Eliza demanded. "When?" "This morning. He was riding fence line on the eastern border, checking for damage from last week's storm. When his horse came back without him, Cole and I went looking, found signs of a struggle, tracks leading north toward the Canadian border." "How many riders?" "At least 4, maybe more." Kate appeared in the doorway, already armed. "Granger." "You don't know that," Eliza said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Who else? We heard his operation, cost him contracts, made him look weak. He can't hit the ranch directly again after what happened last time, so he takes one of ours and forces us to come after him." Cade was already moving, gathering supplies with mechanical efficiency. "It's a trap. Has to be." "Then we don't spring it." He stopped, turned to stare at her. "You want to leave James out there?" "Of course not. But riding into an obvious trap won't save him." "So what do you suggest?" Eliza's mind raced, trying to see angles, predict moves. Granger was smart, methodical. If this was a trap, it would be layered. The kidnapping was meant to draw them out, split their forces, make them vulnerable. But to what end? Then it hit her. "The copper sites," she said. "That's what he really wants. James is bait to get us away from the claims while his men seize them." "Can he do that legally?" "Granger doesn't need legal. He just needs us gone long enough to file his own claims. Bribe the right officials, and by the time we get back, it'll be tied up in courts for years." She slammed her fist on the table. "It's perfect. If we chase James, we lose the copper. If we protect the copper, we lose James." "There's a third option," Cade said quietly. "What?" "We split up. You and most of the crew stay here, protect the claims, maintain the defense. I go after James with whoever volunteers to come. That's suicide. You'd be outnumbered. I've been outnumbered before." "Cade, he's one of mine, Eliza. I brought him here, promised him work and safety. I'm not abandoning him because the odds are bad." She wanted to argue, wanted to find some other solution that didn't involve sending Cade into what they both knew was a death trap. But James was out there, probably terrified, possibly already dead. And leaving him felt like a betrayal of everything the Union was supposed to stand for. "How many men would you need?" she asked finally. 2, maybe 3? Small group moves faster, draws less attention." "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "It's not a discussion." Eliza started gathering her own gear. "Samuel can coordinate defense here with Bear and Cole. Mrs. Johnson can mobilize the Union families if Granger tries anything. But I'm not sending you into the mountains alone." They argued for another 20 minutes, but she wouldn't budge. Finally, Cade gave in with the exhausted resignation of someone who'd learned that arguing with Eliza Thornton was like arguing with a rock slide. Bear volunteered immediately. "The kid saved my life during the attack," he said simply. "I owe him." That gave them 3 riders. Small enough to move fast, large enough to maybe survive an ambush if they were careful. They packed light, food for a week, ammunition, medical supplies, and the knowledge that they were probably riding to their deaths. Samuel caught Eliza before she mounted up. "You're really doing this?" he asked. "I have to." "No, you don't. You could let Cade go. Stay here where it's safe." "Safe?" She laughed bitterly. "Nowhere's safe anymore, Samuel. And if I let Granger think he can just take our people without consequences, we've already lost." "What if you don't come back?" The question hung between them, raw and terrible. Eliza pulled her brother close, felt how much he'd grown in the past months. Not just physically, though he'd shot up several inches, but in the way he carried himself. The kid who used to hide during confrontations now helped coordinate ranch defenses. "If I don't come back," she said quietly, "you finish what we started. You keep the Union together, you fight for this land, and you don't let Granger win. Understand?" Samuel's eyes were wet, but he nodded. "Good. Now listen to Bear and Cole. Don't do anything stupid. And Samuel," she pulled back to look at him, "I'm proud of you, more than you know." Then she was mounted and riding north with Cade and Bear, leaving behind everything she'd fought to build and heading into mountains that had killed stronger people than her. The trail was easy to follow at first. 4 horses moving fast, not bothering to hide their tracks. That alone told Eliza this was meant to be found. Granger wanted them following, wanted them committed before springing whatever he'd planned. They rode hard for 2 days, sleeping in shifts, pushing through terrain that got rougher the farther north they went. The landscape transformed from rolling plains to broken foothills to actual mountains, the kind that killed you if you made a single mistake. On the 3rd day, they found the first body, one of Granger's men lying in a ravine with his throat cut. He'd been dead maybe 12 hours, killed efficiently and left where predators had started working on him. "James didn't do this," Bear said, studying the corpse. "How do you know?" Eliza asked. "Kid doesn't know how to kill quiet like this. This is professional work." Cade crouched beside the body, examining the wound. "Someone else is hunting Granger's men. Question is who?" They found the second body a mile later, then a third. All killed the same way, quick, brutal, silent. And with each corpse, the mystery deepened. Someone was systematically executing the men who'd taken James, but it wasn't rescue. It was elimination. "We're not the only ones tracking them," Cade said as they made camp that night in a shallow cave that offered some protection from wind that cut like knives. "Someone else wants whatever Granger's planning here stopped. Or someone wants James dead and is cleaning up witnesses," Eliza countered. "That doesn't make sense. Why go through the trouble of kidnapping him just to kill him and his captors? Maybe James saw something he shouldn't have. Maybe this whole thing is bigger than we thought." They were still debating possibilities when the gunshot cracked through the darkness. The bullet struck rock inches from Cade's head, spraying them with stone fragments. They scattered, diving for cover as more shots rang out from the ridgeline above. Muzzle flashes lit up the night, revealing at least 5 shooters spread across high ground. "We're pinned!" Bear shouted, returning fire at shapes he couldn't really see. Cade assessed the situation with the cold calculation of someone who'd survived worse. "Cave gives us cover but no escape. They can just wait us out, pick us off if we try to run." "So what do we do?" Eliza asked, loading her rifle with hands that stayed steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. "We make them think we're more trouble than we're worth." He started shooting with deliberate precision, not trying to hit anyone but making the attackers keep their heads down. Bear followed his lead, laying down enough fire that the men on the ridge had to take cover instead of aiming carefully. "Eliza," Cade said without looking at her, "see that outcropping to the left, about 30 yards up?" She looked. Barely visible in moonlight, a tumble of boulders offered a better position. Higher ground, better sight lines. "I see it." If someone could get up there, they'd have a clear shot at the ridge. Flank them, force them to choose between 2 targets. That's suicide. They'd see anyone trying to reach it. Not if they're busy shooting at us. Understanding hit her. "You want me to make that run while you draw their fire?" "I want Bear to make the run." "You're a better shot. You stay here. Cover him." "Bear's wounded. That shoulder's not healed right. He'd never make the climb." "Then I go," Cade said. "No?" Eliza was already moving, checking her ammunition. "You coordinate the defense. I'm faster anyway." "Eliza, We don't have time to argue. On three, you both open up. I'll move during the chaos. Cade looked like he wanted to physically restrain her, but gunfire was intensifying and they were running out of options. This is the stupidest thing you've ever done. Probably won't even make the top 5 after tonight. She positioned herself at the cave entrance. Counted off. 1. Cade raised his rifle. 2. Bear moved to the other side, ready. 3. They opened fire with everything they had, a storm of bullets that forced the attackers to duck. In that precious window, Eliza ran. She'd never moved faster in her life, legs pumping, lungs burning, expecting at any second to feel a bullet tear through her back. Rocks exploded around her feet. Something whistled past her ear. She dove behind a boulder, gasped for air, then kept climbing. The outcropping was worse than it looked from below. Loose scree, sharp angles, no handholds. But terror was excellent motivation. She clawed her way up, feeling fingernails tear and knees scrape raw against stone. From her new position, she could see the ridge clearly. 5 men, just like Cade had estimated, spread out in defensive positions. They were focused on the cave, trying to coordinate for a final push. Eliza took a breath, steadied her rifle, and started shooting. Her first shot dropped the nearest attacker. Her second wounded another. The remaining 3 wheeled around, trying to locate this new threat. And in their confusion, Cade and Bear rushed from the cave. What followed was brutal and quick. Cade moved like something built for violence, closing distance before the attackers could react. Bear fought like his namesake, all power and fury, using his bulk as a weapon. Eliza kept firing from above, providing cover. Within minutes, it was over. 3 men dead, 2 wounded and disarmed. And in the silence that followed the gunfire, Eliza's ears ringing, she climbed down to join Cade and Bear among the bodies. "Who are they?" she asked, not recognizing any of the faces. Cade was searching them, pulling out papers and personal effects. He found a letter in one man's pocket, read it by moonlight, then handed it to Eliza without speaking. The letter was from Granger outlining payment for special work in the Northern Territory. But it wasn't about kidnapping James. It was about eliminating witnesses to something else entirely. "What the hell is going on?" Eliza demanded. One of the wounded men laughed, wet, pained. "You don't even know what you stumbled into, do you?" "Explain it to me." Granger's been running guns through the mountain passes, selling to whoever pays, outlaws, renegade tribes. Anyone who wants weapons, the government won't sell legally. The man coughed blood. "Your friend James? He saw a shipment, recognized one of the buyers. Granger couldn't risk that getting out. So all of this, the kidnapping, the trap, was to silence James and eliminate anyone who might have learned about it from him." The man's eyes focused on Eliza. "You were never supposed to make it out of these mountains." Cade put a bullet in the ground next to the man's head. "Where's James now?" "Dead already, probably. Granger don't leave loose ends." "Where?" "Old mining settlement, 10 miles north. That's where they were taking him." Eliza felt ice form in her chest. "Is he telling the truth?" "Only one way to find out," Cade replied. "They left the wounded men tied and gagged. Not mercy, just pragmatism. If they were lying about James's location, Eliza wanted them alive to interrogate later. If they were telling the truth, they weren't going anywhere." The ride to the mining settlement took the rest of the night through terrain that got progressively more dangerous. By dawn, they reached what used to be a copper operation before the vein ran dry. Now it was just rotting buildings and abandoned equipment, slowly being reclaimed by wilderness. And in the center of it all, tied to a post in what used to be the main processing shed, was James. He was alive. Barely. Beaten badly, one eye swollen shut, blood crusted on his face. But breathing. "It's a trap," Bear said immediately. "Too obvious. They want us to go in there." "I know," Cade replied, "but we're going anyway." They approached carefully, watching for ambush positions, scanning roof lines and windows. The settlement felt wrong, too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. Eliza was 10 feet from James when she heard the click. The explosion that followed was deafening. The ground beneath them erupted as buried charges detonated in sequence, designed to collapse the entire area into a crater. Eliza felt herself thrown sideways by the blast, hit hard enough that her vision went white. When her hearing returned, she was buried under debris with something heavy pinning her legs. She could hear shouting, gunfire, Cade screaming her name. She managed to dig herself partially free just in time to see Granger himself emerge from one of the buildings. He wasn't alone. Behind him came a dozen armed men, and behind them, more of his operation became visible. Crates of weapons, ammunition, supplies that confirmed everything they'd learned. This wasn't just a trap. It was a warehouse for his entire smuggling network. "Well now," Granger said, surveying the wreckage. "This worked out better than expected." Cade had been thrown clear of the blast. He was on his feet, rifle raised, but outnumbered 12-1. Bear was down, unconscious or worse. James hung from the post, unable to even lift his head. "You couldn't just take the money and leave," Granger continued, addressing Eliza. "Had to keep fighting, had to build your little union and think you could challenge me." Eliza tried to move, but pain shot through her leg. Broken, probably. Or at least badly damaged. "This is over, Miss Thornton. Your ranch will be seized for debts you can no longer pay. Your union friends will scatter when they learn you died in a tragic mining accident, and my operation will continue without interference." "The ledger," Eliza gasped. "If anything happens to me—" "The ledger gets released, I know. I've made my peace with that. Let them investigate. By the time any charges come through, I'll be in Mexico living on enough money to last 3 lifetimes. Granger pulled out a pistol. "You made this personal, Miss Thornton. Congratulations. You won." He raised the gun, pointed it at her head. The shot that rang out didn't come from his weapon. Granger staggered, a bloom of red spreading across his shoulder. He spun, searching for the shooter, and took a second bullet to the leg that dropped him. From the ridgeline above, shapes materialized. Union families, armed and angry. Mrs. Johnson led them, her rifle still smoking from the shot that had saved Eliza's life. "Nobody kills our people," she shouted down. Not you. Not anyone." Granger's men found themselves surrounded, caught between the Union fighters above and Cade below. Some raised their hands. Others tried to run and got cut down. Pike attempted to reach his boss but took a bullet to the chest from Samuel, Eliza's little brother, who'd ridden with the rescue party despite being ordered to stay home. The fight was brief and brutal. By the time silence fell again, Granger's men were dead or surrendered, the weapons cache was secured, and the valley's biggest secret lay exposed in the morning light. Eliza was pulled from the debris by Bear, who'd regained consciousness and helped dig her out despite his own injuries. Her leg was broken in 2 places, ribs cracked, shoulder dislocated. But she was alive. They found Granger leaning against a post, bleeding but conscious. His empire had collapsed in less than an hour, destroyed by the very people he'd dismissed as desperate and weak. "How did they know where to find us?" he asked, voice thick with pain. "Samuel figured it out," Eliza said, letting Bear support her weight. "Tracked our route, guessed where the trap would be set, and mobilized the Union. Turns out that scared kid you mocked, he's smarter than both of us." Granger actually smiled at that. "Your father would be proud, or horrified, hard to tell which. He'd be alive if you hadn't killed him. I didn't—" Granger stopped, realized there was no point in lying anymore. He was supposed to survive that storm. The pneumonia was bad luck. There's no such thing as luck out here, just consequences. They tied Granger and his surviving men, prepared them for transport back to Black Ridge. The weapons cache would be evidence, enough to destroy what remained of his network and implicate everyone he'd bribed. James was cut down from the post, given water and basic medical care. He'd survive, though he'd carry scars from this for the rest of his life. "Thank you," he whispered to Eliza, "for coming after me. We don't leave people behind. That's the point of the Union." As dawn fully broke over the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and red, Eliza stood among the wreckage of Granger's operation and felt something shift inside her. The fear that had driven her for months, the desperation that had colored every decision, it didn't disappear. But it changed, became something harder, something certain. She'd come into these mountains expecting to die. Instead, she'd helped destroy the man who'd terrorized the valley for decades. The ride back took 3 days. They moved slowly, hampered by injuries and the prisoners they were transporting. Granger was silent most of the journey, lost in whatever thoughts occupied men whose empires crumbled around them. On the second night, as they camped in a valley that felt 1,000 miles from civilization, Cade found Eliza sitting alone, staring at stars that seemed close enough to touch. You all right? He asked. Define all right. Fair point. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You did good up there. Saved all of us, really. Mrs. Johnson saved us. I was pinned under half a building. You made the decisions that got us there alive, led the charge that exposed Granger, built the union that came to our rescue. He paused. You're a leader, Eliza, whether you want to be or not. She was quiet for a long moment, processing everything that had happened, everything they'd survived. I keep thinking about what Granger said about my father being proud or horrified. What do you think? I think he'd be both. Proud I didn't give up. Horrified at what it cost to win. Is that how you feel? Like we won? I don't know. Granger's finished, but Henderson's still dead. James is traumatized. My leg's broken, your shoulder's torn open again, and we're heading back to a ranch that's barely standing. She turned to look at him. This doesn't feel like winning. Winning never does. Not really. It just feels like surviving long enough to see tomorrow. They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd been through hell together and somehow made it out the other side. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, indifferent to human struggles. Cade, Eliza said quietly. Yeah? When this is over, when we get back and deal with everything waiting there, what are you going to do? He took a long time answering. Honestly, I don't know. Been drifting so long, I'm not sure I remember how to stay put. That a hint you're planning to leave? It's a hint I'm trying to figure out if I've got any reason to stay. Eliza's heart clenched. She'd gotten used to having him around, to relying on his strength and experience. The thought of him just riding off into the sunset felt wrong somehow. What would make you stay? She asked. Cade looked at her, and in the firelight his scarred face seemed younger, more vulnerable. You asking me to? Maybe I am. That's not a real answer. It's the only one I've got right now. She held his gaze. We've got a valley to rebuild, a union to maintain, a ranch that needs more work than two people can handle. And I could use a partner, someone who knows how to fight when fighting's necessary and when to build instead. That a job offer? It's whatever you want it to be. For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then Cade smiled, that rare, genuine thing that transformed his entire face. All right, he said. I'll stay. For a while anyway. See how it goes. Good. Because I wasn't really asking. He laughed at that, and the sound carried across the valley like something precious and rare. When they rode into Black Ridge 3 days later with Granger and his men in custody, the entire town turned out to watch. Some faces showed relief. Others showed fear. Granger had controlled so much for so long that his fall left a vacuum nobody knew how to fill. The sheriff took custody of the prisoners, examined the evidence they'd brought back, and quietly began preparing cases that would occupy courts for years. The weapons cache was seized by federal marshals who'd been investigating gun smuggling for months and were thrilled to finally have something concrete. And Granger, wounded and defeated, was locked in a cell to await trial. Eliza visited him once, against Cade's advice and her own better judgment. She found him sitting on a cot, staring at the wall with eyes that had lost their calculating gleam. Come to gloat? He asked. No, to understand. Understand what? Why you did it. All of it. The corruption, the violence, trying to control the whole valley. What was the point? Granger was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, I wanted to build something permanent. Something that would outlast me, outlast this territory's chaos. And I did it the only way I knew how, by controlling everything and everyone until opposition became impossible. You built a prison? Not a legacy. Maybe. But it was mine. He finally looked at her. You're going to try to do it differently. Build something better. I hope you succeed. I really do. But I don't think you will. Why not? Because this land doesn't reward builders. It rewards survivors. And eventually surviving means becoming what I became. He smiled sadly. Give it 20 years. You'll see. Eliza left the jail with those words echoing in her head, wondering if he was right, if the frontier's brutality inevitably corrupted everyone who tried to civilize it. But then she saw the Valley Union gathered outside. Families who'd fought together, bled together, survived together. She saw Samuel organizing supply distribution with the efficiency of someone twice his age. Saw Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Kowalski planning crop rotations and shared equipment usage. Saw Baron Cole teaching defensive tactics to farmers who'd never held weapons before. Saw Cade waiting by the horses, ready to ride back to a ranch they'd rebuild together. And she thought maybe Granger was wrong. Maybe the frontier didn't have to break everyone. Maybe some people could bend instead, could adapt and build and create something worth keeping. It wasn't certain, nothing ever was out here, but it was possible. And possibility, Eliza was learning, was all you really needed to keep fighting. They rode back to the Thornton Ranch as the sun set over mountains that had nearly killed them. Behind them, Black Ridge Valley was already beginning to change, to reorganize itself around new power structures and possibilities. Ahead of them lay months of hard work, impossible odds, and the constant threat that everything they'd built could still collapse. But for the first time since her father died, Eliza felt something other than desperate fear. She felt hope. Hope, Eliza discovered, was more exhausting than despair. The first month after Granger's arrest felt like trying to build a house during an earthquake. Her broken leg kept her confined to the ranch house, which drove her half insane. She'd spent months moving, fighting, deciding things on horseback. Being stationary felt like dying slowly. "You need to rest," Cade told her, finding her trying to hobble to the barn on crutches. "I've been resting for 3 weeks. Any more, and I'll lose my mind. Your leg won't heal if you keep walking on it. There's too much work," which is getting done. Samuel's coordinating rebuilding. Mrs. Johnson's organizing the cooperative. You don't need to do everything yourself. That's the problem. Eliza sank onto the porch steps. I built this union. Now I'm useless. Cade sat beside her. You're healing. There's a difference. He gestured toward the valley. See that? Henderson's widow working with the Kowalskis, the Johnson boys helping repair the Martinez well. The Martinez family came back last week. They heard what happened and figured maybe the valley was worth fighting for. I didn't do that. The union did. The union exists because you refused to quit when quitting made sense. His voice softened. You showed people things could be different. That's your legacy. The moment hung between them, charged with things neither had words for. Then Samuel appeared. Eliza, we've got a problem. Of course they did. Wallace Crane delivered the news personally. The bank's demanding full payment, $1,400 by month's end, or they seize the property. That's 2 weeks. I know. With Granger's accounts frozen, the bank's desperate for liquidity. They see your ranch as easy money. He set papers on the table with finality. I'm sorry. After he left, Eliza stared at the documents like a death sentence. We sell the mineral rights, Cade said. Find a buyer fast. We'd get half their value in a rushed sale. Samuel had been quiet, studying the papers. What if we don't need to pay it? Excuse me? What if we don't need to pay the debt to keep the ranch? What if someone else buys it from the bank? He pulled out ledgers. The cooperative's been pooling funds. Not enough for your mortgage, but maybe enough to buy the debt at a discount. Eliza stared at her brother. If the union owns the debt instead of the bank, we control payment terms. And we're invested in success instead of failure, Cade added. One problem, Samuel said. The bank has to agree to sell. They won't if they think foreclosure gives them full value. So we convinced them it won't. Over the next week, Eliza orchestrated the strangest negotiation of her life. Every union family delayed bank payments, creating a dozen potential defaults. Mrs. Johnson mentioned to merchants that foreclosure would move union headquarters elsewhere. The Kowalskis spread rumors about contested mineral claims. Samuel pointed out that foreclosing on the union's leader would make enemies of every cooperative family. It was manipulation and pressure. It was also their only play. Crane fought them for days, but eventually agreed to meet. Eliza insisted on attending despite her leg. She rode into Black Ridge in a wagon, surrounded by union families showing solidarity. We're not convinced this benefits the bank, a board member said. It's the best deal you'll get, Eliza replied. She laid out terms. The union would buy the debt for $900. Steep discount, but immediate cash. They'd restructure it as cooperative investment. You're asking us to take a loss. I'm offering guaranteed payment versus risky foreclosure. You seize the ranch, you inherit property you can't sell, contested rights, and valley-wide hostility. Take our offer. Get cash today. The board conferred, finally nodded. Payment within 48 hours. No exceptions. Done. The union had $873. They needed $900. Then Cole arrived. The assayer's back, says he needs to talk immediately. The assayer looked nervous. I made a mistake. Eliza's heart sank. The deposits aren't valuable? They're more valuable. Much more. He spread new papers. I missed a secondary vein beneath the primary deposits. Deeper, harder to reach, exceptional ore quality. Total value $25,000 to $30,000. Silence. 3 buyers are interested. One made an offer this morning. He handed Eliza a telegram. $15,000 for mineral rights. They want to finalize quickly. After he left, Eliza sat surrounded by people waiting for her decision. The smart move was obvious. Sell, secure everything. So why did she hesitate? What's wrong? Kate asked. Something feels off. You're not used to good luck. Maybe. The buyer's representative arrived next day in an expensive coach. Mr. Whitmore, thin, Eastern-dressed, represented Continental Mining Corporation. I've heard about you, he said. The woman who took down Granger. I had help. Nevertheless impressive. I'm authorized to offer $17,000, cash within 1 week. The contract seemed straightforward, but Eliza couldn't shake her unease. I need time to review with my people. Of course. I'll return this evening. After Whitmore left, they gathered everyone. It's legitimate, Crane confirmed. Continental Mining's reputable. Fair offer. So we take it, Mrs. Johnson said. But Eliza couldn't shake that feeling. Whitmore mentioning Granger, the speed, the eagerness. I want to know more about Continental Mining. That could take days, Samuel said. We need to decide now. Then we decide without perfect information. Kate understood. You think this connects to Granger? $17,000 is a lot for deposits they've never verified. Whitmore showing up when we need cash is convenient. We've learned not to trust convenient solutions. Samuel investigated, sending telegrams, calling favors. By evening, they had answers. Continental Mining existed. It was legitimate. And it was owned through shell corporations by Silas Granger. Even from jail he's playing, Cade said. When Whitmore returned, Eliza was ready. We're declining. His smile faltered. $17,000 is more than fair. I'm sure it is, but we're not doing business with Granger, even through intermediaries. I don't know what you're implying. Continental Mining traces back to Granger. You're here on his behalf, so get in your coach and tell whoever sent you that Black Ridge Valley isn't for sale. Whitmore left. The enormity of refusing $17,000 settled over them. I hope you have a plan, Mrs. Johnson said. We find a different buyer, someone who will pay fairly, without strings. In 2 days? Impossible. Impossible's what we do best. James, recovering from the mountains, had been writing mining companies. Rocky Mountain Development from Helena wants to meet. Their representative arrives tomorrow. Catherine Vale arrived alone on horseback. Direct, no polish. Heard you have deposits worth seeing. Eliza liked her immediately. We do, but we need to close fast. Because you're desperate or smart? Both. They spent the day examining sites. Vale was expert, thorough. Deposits are good. I can offer $12,000 plus 5% future profits. Less than Granger's offer, but real. The profit sharing meant long-term benefits. We need money by tomorrow morning. I can wire funds tonight if we agree on terms. They negotiated into evening. By midnight, they had a deal. When Crane counted the union's payment next day, his expression was unreadable. I didn't think you'd pull this off. Neither did I. Over following months, the Valley Union evolved. Families shared equipment, coordinated crops, negotiated collectively. They built a grain silo, established credit systems, created rotating labor pools. It wasn't smooth. People argued about compensation, contributions, decisions. Democracy was messy. But it worked. Granger's trial happened that fall. The ledger proved crucial. Documentation of years of corruption his lawyers couldn't explain away. 20 years in territorial prison. As they led him away, he caught Eliza's eye. I'll be 73 when I get out, if I live that long. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn I was right, that this valley chews up idealists. We'll see. 2 years later, Eliza stood on the rebuilt ranch porch, watching sunset. Samuel had grown into a confident young man managing union logistics. Kate had become the person she trusted most. The valley had transformed, not perfectly, but genuinely. "Penny for your thoughts," Kate said, thinking how different things are. Better different or just different? Both. Mrs. Johnson wants to expand the union to adjacent valleys. What do you think? Growth is dangerous. This works at our scale. Expanding risks breaking it. But staying small risks stagnation. So we're damned either way, Eliza smiled. Welcome to leadership. I got a letter today, Cade said. Colorado. Trail boss position. Good pay. Her stomach clenched. You thinking of taking it? No, but I wanted you to know the offer came. I'm staying by choice, not because I lack options. She turned to look at him. I never doubted that. Didn't you, even a little? Maybe a little. You could succeed anywhere. Sometimes I wonder why you picked here. You really don't know? Humor me. I spent years drifting because staying meant vulnerability, meant caring enough that losing would destroy me. But I finally figured something out. What? Vulnerability's the whole point. You can't build anything real without risking it being taken. The fear of loss doesn't make caring stupid. It makes it brave. Tears threatened. When did you become a philosopher? When I met someone worth being vulnerable for. They stood watching darkness claim the valley. Somewhere in that night, families were finishing dinner, children being put to bed, people living lives they'd fought to keep. Do you ever think about whether we can maintain this long term? Eliza asked. Every day. And? Nothing lasts forever. The union will change, evolve, maybe collapse, but that doesn't make it meaningless. We proved cooperation could work in a place designed for conflict. That matters, even if it only lasts a generation. A year later, the railroad company approached with a massive offer: land rights, jobs, infrastructure, modernization. The union met to discuss it. This is what we work toward, one farmer argued. Market access, development. It's the end of what we built, another countered. Once they control the valley, we're dependent on forces we can't influence. The debate raged. Some wanted to sell, others wanted to preserve independence. Finally, Mrs. Johnson turned to Eliza. What do you think? All eyes settled on her. I think we negotiate, not to sell outright, but establish terms protecting what we built. We want the railroad on our conditions, jobs for families, fair compensation, protections preventing them from controlling our operations. They'll never agree. Maybe not. But we try. If they refuse, we choose, grow with changing times, or stay small and risk irrelevance. I vote we adapt. The frontier's changing whether we like it or not. We can resist and get crushed, or shape that change preserving what matters. After more debate, the union agreed. They negotiated with the railroad, demanding unprecedented protections. Most expected the company to refuse. They didn't. Stability was worth more than total control. The contract became a model studied throughout the territory, one of the first worker cooperatives successfully negotiating with corporate interests on equal footing. 5 years after her father's death, Eliza stood at the new railroad junction dedication. Hundreds attended. The governor gave speeches about progress, but what she'd remember was afterward, standing with original union families. We did it, Mrs. Johnson said. Actually did it. Henderson should be here, Martinez's widow added. He died making it possible, Eliza corrected. Every person who fought when fighting seemed futile. That built this. That evening, the union celebrated at the ranch. Music filled the valley. Children ran laughing. People danced in the barn they'd rebuilt together. Eliza found herself standing apart, needing quiet. The weight of everything felt crushing. She'd set out to save her father's ranch, somehow help change the entire valley. You look thoughtful, Cade said, appearing with whiskey, thinking about where we started, how impossible this seemed. And now? Now it seems impossible that it worked. He clinked his cup against hers. To impossible things. To impossible things. Later, alone on the porch, Cade asked, Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret fighting this hard for something that could still fail? Eliza looked at the valley. No. Even if the Union collapsed tomorrow, I wouldn't regret it. We proved something that needed proving. What? That the frontier doesn't have to make us monsters. That we can choose to build instead of destroy, cooperate instead of compete, be vulnerable enough to care beyond our own survival. She looked at him. You taught me that. You showed me strength isn't about being invulnerable. It's about protecting things that matter, even when protection seems impossible. Cade took her hand, calloused palm against calloused palm. I love you, he said simply. Thought you should know. I love you too. They stood there, holding hands, watching stars wheel overhead. In the end, that was what mattered. Not immortality or perfect victory, just that they'd tried. That they'd built something good in a harsh place, chosen cooperation over conquest, survived not by becoming hard, but by remaining human. The frontier had tried to break them. They'd refused. And in that refusal, they'd changed not just themselves, but the valley, proving that even in the hardest places, against impossible odds, people could choose to be better than survival demanded. Years later, when people asked what she'd learned, Eliza would answer simply, that impossible just means nobody's done it yet. And in Black Ridge Valley, where mountains stood guard over land paid for in blood and sacrifice, families continued working together, proving every day that the impossible could become real if you were stubborn enough to refuse giving up. The woman they'd expected to break had become the woman who changed everything, not by being perfect, not by never failing, but by refusing to stay broken when breaking would have been easier. And that, in the end, was the only victory that truly mattered.